Welcome to Story Radio, the podcast for readers, writers and lovers of literature everywhere. Today we're talking to Libby Page. She is a Sunday Times bestseller and her debut novel was shortlisted for British Book of the Year. Her novels have now sold over 1 million copies in the UK and have been translated into 29 languages. We're here to talk about her new book, 6 Little Words, which is out with HarperCollins in March 2026. Sally, it's great to talk with you again. We talked to you about the Book of Beginnings nearly 3 years ago. Now you're back with 6 Little Words. Could you tell us a little bit about the book and how it came about?
Yes, of course, and thank you very much for having me. 6 Little Words really is a book about creativity and why we struggle with creativity. But it starts with 6 little words being put up in a cafe on a notice board, to be or not to be. And it starts to get people interested in what on earth is this about, and then more quotes appear on the notice board, Shakespeare quotes, and it eventually leads a sort of a trail to what is a community group who are trying out creative projects perhaps for the first time. And the 2 main characters, Kate and a guy called Bardi, are people for different reasons who are struggling with their inspiration, creativity, and it's them coming together with a community group, and it deals with the friendships and the difficulties that these people are experiencing.
As I was reading it, I became increasingly sure that I knew the location, and it's based in Clyde, mainly on the North Norfolk coast. I was trying to work out afterwards what it was that kind of told me that location, and I wondered whether you deliberately kind of given us markers to say where it was, or whether it just emerged naturally out of the narrative.
Oh, very much so. It's the first book I've written which is rooted in place, and it was something I wanted to explore. And North Norfolk seemed the natural place for me, even though I live in Dorset, so miles away. But I wanted to explore that sense of the vast skies, the marshes, those coastlines, but also the towns and villages in that area, which for me are really beautiful. So that was an important part of the book.
Yeah, so what particular elements was the mood of the place that kind of made you want to set it there?
Oh, lots of things, and past memories of visiting it as a child. And it's quite a haunting place, and also it has a strong association with creativity. And I think, if I'm honest, one of the reasons I set it there was because when I was a little girl, the first book that I ever read that made a massive impression on me was called When Marnie Was There by Joan G. Robinson, and it's set in the marshes of East Anglia. And it was that moment when you read a book that for the first time you are swept away by it. And so I think when I thought about, I want to place a book somewhere, that was one of the reasons I centred it there.
Yeah, I love the way it kind of changes so much with the tides around there.
Yes, and I took a lot of advice on that from my brother and sister-in-law who live in Ely and visited the area a lot with me. But also it was an area that was my father, who died a couple of years ago, was very fond of. So I think there's also a family association, even though I live miles away.
I love the central theme of people exploring their creativity and the barriers, internal and external, that they face when they're trying to do that. Can you tell us more about that? What made it so important to you to explore it in the book?
I think it was always going to be a central theme, and it came about, the book came about because during lockdown a friend of mine turned up on my doorstep, standing the right distance apart, and told me about the King Lear Prize, which was a prize during lockdown to encourage people to explore creative projects, I think as a way of helping with their mental health. And he was telling me about it, and I realised when I actually looked it up, I was too young to enter, because at that stage I think you had to be over 80 or something to enter. But I liked the idea. It really struck me, the idea of it, because the reason it's called the King Lear Prize, and why 6 little words is, you know, a big theme in my book, to be or not to be, and each chapter is a Shakespeare quote, is because Shakespeare wrote quite a number of plays during quarantine from the plague. So this idea of lockdown also being a stage of creativity, and though my book is set after lockdown, it did, you know, the King Lear Prize was one of the sort of the starting point for it. So that whole thing about creativity. Once I then started down that route of why we sort of sometimes submerge our creative talents or think we're not good enough, I started to explore that through conversations with my friends, my publisher, my agent, but also I visit a lot of book clubs. So I'd ask my book clubs going, so do you think of yourselves as creative? And all of that, it was like an explosion of thoughts of how people view themselves, the people who do say they're creative, but they are very few. Most people say, oh no, not really. And then when you talk to them about what they do, they go, oh, actually I do write poetry, and, you know, I do paint sometimes, or I always knit my husband a hat for Christmas, which actually these things all featured in the book. So I could really realise it was a rich theme and something I can empathise with.
Yes, I love the character Brenda, it is, isn't it, who knits these incredibly creative outfits for dogs. I thought that she was a lovely character. You paint as well as write, is that correct?
Yes, I do. And I think the reason I could write this book is because I experienced all the problems that my characters were experiencing. So writing, I find easier in a funny sort of way. I think because years ago I ran a market research company, I had to write reports, so there was a rhythm and a sort of discipline to my writing. Painting, I experienced all the self-doubt, the procrastination, everything that my characters experienced. So I wanted to really explore that and had a natural empathy with quite a lot of my characters.
Do you have any tips for our listeners about overcoming their fears, how to sort of actually release your creativity, your own creativity?
I mean, I would like to say that just do it for the joy of it, but I can tell myself that and I still don't do it. So I think having a project can help. So I always paint my Christmas card. And I think, and as my agent always, she actually always knits her husband a Christmas hat, because when they'd had no money, that's what she always gave him for Christmas. So I think sometimes having a project, because it gets over that thing of, oh, I shouldn't really be doing that. You go, oh no, I do this for this. And I know I should argue that you should just create for the joy of creating, but sometimes just a step into something like doing a card or knitting something for somebody can be a start.
Gives you a framework. Yeah, absolutely. I really enjoyed the bird imagery in your novel, and the way you used it to explore themes of migration and travel, and, you know, Bardi, one of the main characters, is a home bird, you know, and his ex-wife or estranged wife is, you know, a traveller, and so I want to know, is bird watching also an interest of yours, or something?
It's becoming an interest, but it was very much my dad's interest and is my brother's interest. So when I was visiting North Norfolk, particularly with my brother, we often went bird watching, and I do have he did buy me a pair of binoculars, and I can't really identify all the birds he can. But as I was learning about the countryside, the birds, this whole theme of migration really started to emerge within the novel, and I couldn't write about that area without it. And he actually said, as one of my characters says in the book, my brother said, he loves the idea that as the landscape changes, the migration of the birds doesn't, that it actually, over the thousands of years, these birds have been, you know, going up to the Arctic and coming back through. And then what I began to realise through him, there are so many different migrants. There are seasonal migrants. There are the exotics who make their home there. And so I could see that these were nice themes to explore within the book through people.
Synaesthesia, which is the kind of blurring where one sensual experience triggers another. So like, maybe sound triggering colour or something like that. That's an important theme in your novel. And Bardi has a very strong association with colour with people. Could you talk a little bit about how that came about and how you used it, please?
I think to start with, I'd always been interested in it, and in fact my partner experiences certain things in colour, so it was something I was aware of. And in fact, as I was chatting about it to a friend, she said, well, all of the days of the weeks are colours, aren't they? She said, well, Monday is always French Navy. And I was like, no, not really. But I began to realise, people do, there's a whole range of synaesthesia. Obviously, it is particularly associated with musicians. So I think it's Sibelius who's asked his decorator to paint his stove F major, which is green. So I was very interested in it. But also, this is the first book I've written where one of the voices is male. So it alternates between Kate and Bardi, and I was a bit nervous about writing a man. And once I thought about the colour, I thought this gives me a start. This is something that he is experiencing. His mind is just flooded with colour when he sees certain people. It is not something he wants to talk to many people about, because saying you see people in colour is clearly not something you want to be talking about. But he just gets flooded with a colour. Nothing to do with obviously their skin or their hair, but his mind is filled with the colour as it is when he has certain experiences. So that was a really nice hook for me to start writing Bardi.
Were there any other tricks you used for the male voice as opposed to the female voice?
I think because they alternated chapters, I made Bardi's sentences shorter, punchier, and also there's a character in it, Lou, his best friend. They were friends from being at school, and he was going to be a very small character, but actually as I started to write it, Lou emerged as this wonderful character. And it is a book quite a lot about male friendship, but Lou and Bardi just take the mick out of each other, and I found that a very helpful way to write that voice. But also they made me laugh as I wrote it. I didn't know what they were going to say, but once they started, I was chuckling as I was writing it. So I think they brought a lot of humour to me. I didn't really do much. They just got on with it.
Yeah, I love the scenes where they were sitting by the riverbank in the early hours chatting, and just that really worked for me.
And that came from my window cleaner, who was so lovely. And he said to me once, because it was during lockdown, they snuck away at sort of 4 o'clock in the morning and meet. And my window cleaner told me, he said, well, Sal, me and my mate, we shouldn't have done it, but we used to go and sit down by the river at 4 o'clock in the morning because they were lonely, and they'd share some beers, and he felt really guilty about it. And they'd, early hours of the morning they would go, and I loved that male friendship, looking after each other.
There's a story about the lies we tell in the novel, the small and large ones, and of course the group end up calling themselves the King's Lear Liars. Can you talk a bit about lies and truth? Yes,
well, Bardi and Kate are both hiding something. So there are things which are submerged. So is it a lie? Is it something you hide? And actually the book, when I first started writing it, was called The King Lear Liars in my head. And whilst I think Six Little Words is a much better title, my publisher always comes up with better titles than me, but I still loved the idea of the King Lear Liars, so I thought I wanted to include it somehow. So that came in towards the end of the novel when they all confess their lies, because we all tell lies.
It's all felt very credible. I thought the novel, nothing jarred for me, and I saw all the research that you did in the acknowledgements, and I think it really kind of paid off. What's your approach to research? Do you kind of do it all in advance of writing, or do you kind of do it as you go along?
I do most of it in advance, because most of my books, whilst they're contemporary novels, have a historical thread that runs through them. This one is more about art than history. But doing that research up front I find really interesting, and it also helps form the story. I'm thinking of one I'm working on at the moment. I'm going to be doing sort of 3 months of research before I ever start writing. But then as I write, it might be that I also combine that with research, because it's a different part of your brain. So I'm a morning person, I will get up and write, but your creativity and that you can wear yourself out. And when I get to a stop, but I still have some energy left, I might do research then, because it's more relaxing. It's not so, it doesn't drag at your emotions. It's a sort of almost like more of an academic thing. So a lot of research up front, but then little bits as I go through.
There is a danger of just kind of endlessly researching, isn't there? I kind of do find that when I do research, I just kind of end up on these ridiculous paths into more and more obscure territories.
And my publisher's always, my editor is always often will try and cut some of it back. And I think over time, over the number of books I've written, I've learned, that's something I have learned, not to put everything in, because what you find fascinating, because you've become absorbed in it, you realise actually you can distract from the main narrative. So it's learning that to what's important, how much to put in that's really interesting, but also brings the story along.
And with the ending, did you always have that ending in mind, or did you kind of play with other endings?
Not really. I think it's fair to say, I'm not giving anything away, that I do really like happy endings. I may not tie everything up, but I do like a happy ending. But the last line of the book just came, and that for me was an absolute gift from one of the characters. And it still makes me smile when I think of it. But yes, the ending, I sort of knew there was going to be a positive outcome.
I think we all need some, good endings at the moment, don't we?
We need hope. I think, I hope to think my books are filled with characters that I hope that you can believe in, but that they're sort of decent people in the main, and that there's hope within just normal people. I write about very ordinary people, but I always think there's hope.
You find so many sort of extraordinary facets to their ordinariness as well.
Yeah, that's life. That is life.
Yeah.
I mean, I think in fact my first book came out when I was 60, but I've had a very varied career of doing all sorts of things, including market research. I spent years doing group discussions and depth interviews, and my whole life experience is that everybody has a story to tell, and the ordinary is extraordinary.
Some not happy stories, though.
Yeah, not always, but even within the tragedy, you'll find hope, you'll find people, kindness.
And could you tell us a little bit about your current project?
Yes, well, I've got The Six Little Words comes out March the 12th, but the first book I ever wrote, it was in 2016, was a cosy crime, and it's very different from...
So even before it had been invented?
Yeah, probably. And I obviously didn't get it. It wasn't taken up by anybody. But when my agent read it, she went, "What's not to like about this?" So actually Harper Fiction are bringing it out in the autumn.
That's exciting.
Yeah, that's really exciting. So that's being worked on at the moment. And I do have another book that is written and I'm editing, but I can't say anything about that yet.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for coming on the
thank
show,
you.
Sally.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
And we'd love to, I believe you have a reading for us.
Yes.
And we'd love to hear that and just record it for our listeners. This is Sally reading from Six Little Words.
So there are two things I'm going to read. The first is the prologue, which really introduces us to Bardi, who is, he's called John Shakespeare, but he's known to his friends as Bardi. And this is him looking back at his life, and it explains a bit about his synaesthesia. She was a golden yellow, that luminous tone that sits between the glistening hue of honey and a wheat field caught in the slanting rays of an August evening. He saw it as soon as he met her. He wonders sometimes if he glimpsed it, turned to the glow, even before she walked into his classroom. Dull red exercise books held in the crook of her arm, spines nestled against her hip. She had introduced herself, Miss Anderson, Hannah, a new teacher like him. She laughed at his name, most did. Then she left for her own classroom, his life changed forever. He dips into the memory of the colour like the painter he isn't. She was the artist, had taught him so much about colour, but she never could quite understand when he tried to tell her how he saw certain people. Instead, she laughed and later, weeks, months later, had turned her head towards him on the pillow and asked if he experienced things in colour. He smiled and shrugged a nod sometimes. Sex, she asked, stretching like a cat beside him. He just reached for her, unsure if she would laugh at him again. But he knew that sex with her started with the blue of a Slovenian lake made turquoise with the richness of lime, that it strengthened to ultramarine until there was a purple so deep he was lost in it. So that's Bardi looking back on his life. The story starts 39 years later, and the next bit I'm going to read introduces you to Kate, who is a cancer survivor, woman in her late 50s, living in North Norfolk. To be or not to be, that is all that is written on the orange card, 6 little words, nothing more. Kate scans the rest of the notice board for a clue. There are the usual advertisements for toddler groups, RNLI, bake sales and Pilates, a testament to the customers who gather in this small Italian-style coffee shop. Locals in the winter months, incomers in the summer months, or when the sweep of migration draws the birders in their flocks. She turns her attention back to the notice board. Reflexology. Yoga for dogs. Kate smiles. But there is nothing that sheds any light on the orange notice. She glances over her shoulder to the young girl behind the counter, tempted to ask her. But she has her head down, texting on her phone. Or is she filming herself? The owner, Luigi, appears from the back. Phone, he barks, the girl, who flicks it into her apron pocket with a fluid twist of the hand. I wasn't, she declares, eyes wide, head shimmering with indignant shakes. Tay, you know the rules. Chill out, she mutters, head ducked low. But her voice holds the suspicion of a grin that Kate cannot see, although she spots the answering ghost of a smile on Luigi's face. I bet he likes having her around. I bet it makes him feel alive. Kate looks around at the cafe with its speckled marble tabletops, circled by chairs painted duck egg blue or teal. Along one wall is a long bench filled with orange and turquoise patterned cushions, a long wooden table set in front of it, ready for the larger groups. On the wall, in pale ash frames, are retro posters of colourful houses spilling into Mediterranean seas. And behind the counter, a large square oil painting of lemons, their skins flecked with sunshine. She fleetingly wonders if there will come a time when the cafe will start to look dated and tired. Luigi has not changed a single thing in here since his wife Tina died 4 years ago. The espresso cups she collected still hang from hooks below a shelf stacked with the cafe's terracotta and white china. If the time comes, perhaps Tay, she thinks that's what Luigi called her, will sort it out for him. Now that is the question. I'm sorry. Startled, Kate turns to the woman who is standing beside her. She didn't hear the woman and a man she presumes to be her husband come in. To be or not to be, that is the question, the woman repeats, smiling at Kate. She looks to be in her late 70s, wrapped up against the wind and squally rain. It's late March. But not a birder, Kate decides. Smart Mac and black boots. Ah, Shakespeare, her husband proclaims, joining them. The woman raises an eyebrow at Kate. Yes, Lennon, I think we gathered that. I was wondering what it, Kate starts. Leonard's words roll over her, flattening them. Hamlet, of course. He's talking about life. To be or not to be? Coffee and cake, he continues in all in one breath. He doesn't wait for an answer, and his wife's eyes follow him as he bustles towards the counter. Are you married? She asks Kate, still watching him. Divorced, Kate replies, with more relief than regret. Wise, the woman comments, looking at her husband, who is gesticulating at each cake in turn. Coffee or blueberry and almond? Or there are brownies? Don't much like the look of the carrot cake, Leonard calls, oblivious of Tay's eye roll. Coffee, the woman responds, smiling at Tay. She continues reflectively. When you were married, did you ever dream that you were hitting your husband over the head with a frying pan? Kate laughs. No, can't say I did. She had thought a lot of things about Doug, or Dougie as he now likes to be called, but that hadn't been one of them. Do you? She inquires. Oh yes, I often dream that, the woman says mildly. She leans in closer as she moves away, and sometimes I'm not even asleep.
That was Sally Page, reading from her new novel, 6 Little Words. If you're enjoying the podcast, please don't forget to leave us a review. We'll be back next month with another author interview. Thank you and goodbye.